When Earth becomes inhospitable, humanity sets its eyes on space, the final frontier, to make a new home for themselves. They create a new home for themselves named Avalon, a paradise amongst the stars. To expand their journeys into other distant galaxies, the Galactic Alliance of humankind is formed to regulate these affairs for the prosperity of humankind, as they begin exploring the outer reaches of the universe. Nasty mollusk-like creatures known as Hideose appear out of nowhere as a threat against the Galactic Alliance. These creatures are out for blood, and the fires of war are lit for the first time in space. 16-year-old Ensign Ledo, armed with Chamber, an autonomous robot, joins the fight against the Hideose. He is assigned to the first attack and heads to the battlegrounds. However, the attack eventually ends in despair as humankind suffers heavy casualties. A retreat is ordered by Ledo's superior officer named Kugel. But Ledo can't make it back in time, and due to an explosion, he is lost in space for a while, crash landing back on an Earth that is completely encompassed by water. Cast away on Earth, he now waits for an opportunity to trek back to where he was. Cut to 6 months later, a salvage ship by the name of Gargantia recovers Chamber from the sea. The scavengers aboard the Gargantia think they have found something of value, though Ledo mistakes their breach of his weapon as hostility and manages to sneak on board the ship. He explored the Earth for a while, but he was never noticed by anyone other than the scavenger ship repairman, Pinion. As he gets on board the ship, he takes a young girl named Amy as his hostage. A chase ensues as Ledo is consistently getting cornered by the crew of Gargantia. However, he finds out that he's on a habitable planet. In the sheer shock of the moment, he lets go of Amy and summons Chamber back to himself. The autonomous robot reveals that Earth is indeed the planet of origin for all humanity. The crew has Ledo pinned on a pylon at this point, but he tries to begin a friendly conversation with Rigid, the second in command to the fleet commander. Chamber translates for Ledo as the new crew is surprised by the robot's autonomous existence. Rigid discusses the situation with her crew members, while Amy heads back to visit her bedridden little brother Bebel so she can give him a miniature ship wheel to complete his model ship project. She later visits Ledo in a holding cell to offer him fish as a sign of friendship. Amy then begins telling Ledo about Earth. She explains how Earth was once completely frozen, and some humans still chose to remain here instead of going out to space. The ice eventually melted with time, and the world got turned into a vast ocean. Now people formed fleets to survive on the seas, and they scavenge and salvage technology from the old world in order to make new advancements. Rigid searches for other items, advanced technology that must have fallen with Ledo. She sends Bellows, leader of the excavation team, to the location where they found Chamber, but Bellows' ship becomes the target of pirates while the excavation is taking place. Amy asks Ledo for a ship, and he agrees because he wants to earn their trust. Ledo boards Chamber and demolishes the pirates with ease. No harm comes to Bellows, his crew, or his ship. The crew of Gargantia is in utter disbelief at Chamber's destructive power. This leads Amy's disapproval of Ledo's use of such weaponry, and eventually they explain to Ledo that on Earth, humanity must survive through shared values, and that weapons shall only be used as a means of a last resort. However, in the background, the leaders of the Gargantia discuss the eventual retaliation they might receive at the hands of the Pirate Empress, and right as Ledo and Amy reconcile, they are attacked by the Pirate Empress, Lukage's entire pirate fleet. Ledo recognizes that he has to help them, so he discusses the situation with Rigid and manages to get a deal. He helps them out against the attack, and they will accept him aboard the fleet as a member of the crew. Rigid orders him to do this cleanly, with no casualties, so Ledo does what he does best. He defeats the fleet easily by disabling the pirate ships in the front lines, which renders the back line unable to move. He heads back to the Gargantia to deal with the sneak attack headed by Lukage herself. She's got her own handcrafted mecha known as the Surfing Lobster Yunboro. Ledo takes her out with absolute ease and forces the pirates to flee the battle. The crew cheers for their new hero, and Ledo is greeted by Amy, who he replies with a thanks, the first native expression that he's learned of the people of Earth. Of course, now that he's thwarted the Pirate Empress's entire attack, Rigid notifies him that he has to pay for the collateral damage in an invoice, though luckily all the living expenses for him and the fee of having Chamber aboard is relieved, giving him a permanent home on Earth. Ledo and Chamber begin forming a life for themselves on board the Gargantia. Chamber begins to help the other workers with the remedial tasks. Meanwhile, Ledo is busy sculpting the Hideo's claw that he always carries with himself. He dreams of finding a way back out into space, so he can rejoin the war effort and help diminish the Hideos from destroying mankind in space. He gives the sculpture to Amy, who plans to pass it on to her brother, Bebel, later on. They go to meet the resident crew doctor, Oldham, who explains to Ledo that most of the old world technology is lost in the sea, so they can't help him return to space. Later on, Amy takes Ledo to meet her brother, Bebel, who wonders what life is like in space. It begins to rain, and Ledo helps the crew collect rainwater to replenish the freshwater supply for the fleet. Bebel realizes that Ledo actually carved a flute. Bebel begins playing it, and it stunts a long-forgotten memory in Ledo's mind that makes him tear up. Ledo asks for the flute back and wonders if he should learn more about the Earth and its surroundings. Chamber mentions that he needs to leave all this behind and eventually make his way back to his unit, but Ledo decides that he will look for a job on board the crew. Unfortunately for him though, he manages to not find a single vacant position for his skills or interest. The Gargantia stops moving as it's time for maintenance. The workers take advantage of the calm day and begin their repairs. It's a calm day, so Pinon sees this as an opportunity and invites Ledo and Amy to the beach, along with fellow couriers Seiya and Melty. There's an energy shortage, so Pinon is unable to cook meat. He sends Ledo on an errand so he could use Chamber as a grill. Amy, Seiya, and Melty are tasked by Rigid to turn on the sprinkler, so the three begin racing toward the top of a crane tower using surf kites. The race is going on, but Amy manages to take time out and save Ledo from three swindlers who are trying to hire him. The girls return to the party, and Ledo does too with a bottle of sauce he was tasked to fetch from a bag. Amy tells Ledo that Pinon arranged the party to cheer Ledo up, especially because he couldn't find a job. Ledo eventually finds a job as a fisherman, but he's horrible at it and sends Chamber to do it for him instead. Meanwhile, Pinon invites Ledo for lunch and offers him a job as a member of the repairman crew, and at the same time, the Bellows offer him a job on the evacuation team. Amy, Seiya, and Melty are having the time of their life dancing at the festival for the crowd. But Ledo's PTSD takes over as he sees a cooked octopus and points his gun at it. Bellows and Pinon assure him it's good food and that he should calm down. Ledo mistook it for a Hideos though, which explains his PTSD triggering. Ledo then goes on to help Chamber catch some good fish. He boards and nets some real food. Later in the same night, Ledo and Amy spend a lot of time alone, becoming closer and forming a deeper bond. A natural light from the ocean's reflection puts Ledo in a state of alertness. He arms himself right away so he can defend Amy. She calms him down though and dances for him because he asks her to. The next day, Ledo begins salvage work with Bellows, and things are going great until an underwater creature appears and begins attacking them. Chamber identifies the creature as a Hideos, and Leo quickly abandons his work and heads to confront it. Bellows pleads him not to hurt the creature, but Ledo kills it without remorse. The creature turns out to be a whale squid, which was considered to be a sacred animal on the planet. News of this killing spreads like wildfire, and an impending curse is rumored to appear on the Gargantia. Pinon thinks that Ledo should draft into his crew so they can explore the uncharted whale squid territory and salvage its treasures. However, Bellows tries to stop him. Though a problem arises when Chamber analyzes that the whale squid are indeed similar to the Hideos, which means that Ledo swears to exterminate every last one of them. Amy and Babel attempt to change his mind, but Ledo is unfazed by their pleas. A huge number of whale squids are seen approaching the Gargantia, and Ledo is ready to attack them all. Fleet Commander Fairlock orders that all machinery and lights be shut down temporarily as to avoid provoking the whale squids, and instead letting them quietly pass from under the ship. Ledo's resolve is almost at its breaking point at this moment, and he almost attacks the whale squids, but he stops when Rigid points a gun at him and tells him to stand down. The whale squids pass from underneath the Gargantia without any incidents, just as Fairlock is informed by Pinon of his plans to explore the uncharted whale squid territories for salvage with Ledo's help. The ship commander Flange agrees to join Pinon in this conquest, while Fairlock tries to dissuade them from this horrible idea. However, Fairlock suffers from a heart attack from the stress of the events, and before death, he appoints Rigid as his successor. Chamber comes to Ledo with some good news. He's finally managed to pinpoint the location of their civilization in space. Though it's not all good news. It may quite literally take thousands of years before someone picks up their distress signal due to Earth being quite devoid of any technology. During Fairlock's funeral, several ships follow Pinion's plans and they begin to secede from the Gargantia. Melty is one of the people who decides to leave with them. Amy tells Seiya that she cannot abandon Bebel, even though Ledo is leaving as well. Bellows and Rigid share a moment where he tells her not to overly burden herself. She has the support of her entire fleet with her. Bebel realizes that Amy is yearning for Ledo to not leave, so he tries to discourage Ledo from leaving. Ledo doesn't seem to care though. His lust for whale squid blood is untamed. He wants to kill them, not for himself, but to protect Amy and Bebel from the Hideos. Rigid sees Fairlock off as his body is taken away by the ocean waves. She asks the crew of the Gargantia to lend her their support. Amy is broken apart seeing the distant ships leaving the Gargantia, Ledo on board with them. It's a saddening moment for her. Ledo soon begins his offensive attacks on a whale squid nest. He's assisted by Pinion's crew. They throw down a barrage of depth charges which begin obliterating the enemies without any effort. Pinion recalls how he witnessed his brother die at the hands of a whale squid on a mission to find some treasure. Ledo lands in an ancient facility. He finds some records in a storage container. He accesses the records and learns that the Hideos were originally humans. They went through heavy genetic modifications which helped them adapt to outer space environments. They called themselves the Evolvers. A faction of humanity deemed their actions as blasphemy, and hence they declared war upon their kind. This is what led to the current conflict in space. It escalated after the two parties left Earth when the Earth entered its 5th ice age. The only ones that remain now are current humans, and the ancestors to the Hideos. Ledo is mentally distraught by this revelation, and he cries out of despair when Chamber kills a Hideo's child without Ledo's permission. Meanwhile, at Gargantia, Bebel and Amy show signs of sadness as they miss Ledo too much. All the Hideos in the area are killed by Pinion and his compadres. The crew then manages to salvage rare ancient technology from the old world. Pinion believes that his crew has the right to keep the technology for themselves, so he sends a broadcast to other fleets and warns them to keep out of his territory or there will be consequences. A bunch of the ships in the Gargantia wish to join Pinion's fleet, while he keeps forcing other pirate crews to join his fleet as well, using ancient technology that he has transformed into weaponry. Chamber later reveals to Ledo that the light bugs that humanity uses as a power source were also created by the Hideos, which proves their discovery that the Hideos were simply humans that evolved. Ledo begins to question the war effort, and whether it's even worth fighting the Hideos after all that he's discovered. Chamber concludes that the Galactic Alliance and the Hideos simply cannot coexist within the same galaxy. He proclaims that one side evolved and perfected their civilization, meanwhile the other side relinquished the concept of civilization altogether. The conflict amongst the two species is simply inevitable. A huge fleet approaches Earth after a random transmission from a Galactic Alliance vessel. Ledo sees that Kugel is still alive inside his mecha named Striker. He then receives instructions from Kugel to return to active duty. He reunites with his former superior and realizes that Kugel suffers from a rare disease, which means that he cannot leave his cockpit. Ledo tells Kugel everything that he learned about the Hideos, and how they were originally humans. Kugel then reveals that he always knew about it, just like the High Command of the Galactic Alliance always knew about it as well. They still insist on fighting the Hideos because they were rallying a powerful fleet with an imperialist military society that would rally all humans on Earth under them to recruit them into the war effort. Kugel summons Pinion to his fleet, and he's surprisingly taken there by Lukács, who now works for Kugel. Pinion is approached by Kugel's robot caliber striker X-3752, who offers him a post as an engineer on board the fleet to maintain the ships and develop weapons for the fleet. Pinion and his comrades are forced to join Kugel's fleet in separate departments, and after some time, Kugel is ready to reveal the next part of his plan to Ledo. Kugel devises a large-scale operation which shocks Ledo. It's a plan that involves the Gargantia, and in order to get that, he will attack the Gargantia. Ledo tries to dissuade Kugel, but he doesn't really listen to him. The attack begins at the hands of Lukács, and Ledo is forced to stop Kugel by his own self. Pinion aids him in this, equipping Chamber with some fantastic new weapons that will help him in taking down Striker. Meanwhile, on the Gargantua, Lukács and Flange make preparations for the impending uprising. As the fleet starts to throw out their sick and weak into the ocean to decrease the weight, Ledo realizes that this might happen to Bebel, and he quickly begins his counterattack on Kugel. Ledo instructs Melty to deliver a message to the Gargantia, so she quickly heads to the fleet, but almost faints by traveling that much by herself. Amy rescues her, and they inform the crew of the Gargantia about Kugel's incoming attack. The Gargantia must abandon the fleet as Ledo recommended, but Amy urges the high command of the fleet to help Ledo as well. Oldham suggests that Ridget make use of a special key that Fairlock entrusted her with, as he gave his position up to her upon his death. Now the rebellion begins. Ledo is assisted by Pinion's crew as they fight Kugel. Meanwhile, the pirates led by Lukács begin to attack the Gargantia's fleet soldiers. The battle is tough and it goes on for a while, but Ledo finally manages to pin Kugel down and opens Striker's cockpit. It is then revealed that Kugel has been dead inside for a while. It seems that Striker came to the conclusion that humans must view her as their god in order to ensure the stability of the fleet. Ledo and Chamber disagreed with that philosophy, and they decided to destroy the robot. Ledo merged his nervous system with Chamber's interface, creating a neural link that increased Chamber's capabilities, but the risk to Ledo's life was much more severe now. However, Amy arrives soon after and tells Ledo that he's not alone in this fight. Humans fight in numbers and they can rely on their fellow soldiers. Bridget uses the special key to activate an ancient mass driver stored inside the main ship, and she uses it to bombard the enemy fleet. Pinion begins to evacuate his crew on the salvage vessel and intends to destroy all the recovered relics and Stryker's followers on board the ship. However, Stryker is saved at the last second by Lucas. Ledo and Chamber pursue Stryker when she starts to target the Gargantia. This is one moment where Ledo wishes to survive. He's lived his whole life as a soldier and has always been willing to die in the heat of battle. He deserves to live today. He wishes to survive and live out his life with Amy. Chamber relieves Ledo from duty and ejects him to safety. He then rushes into Stryker and destroys her with a fatal suicide attack. Chamber sacrifices himself in an act to save Ledo, and that concludes his story. Sometime later, Ledo has become an experienced excavator in the whale squid territory. He's living his best life, he's got a relationship with Amy, and Bevel is also safe and happy. Deep in the ocean though, whale squid larvae begin to attach themselves to Chamber's mechanical corpse. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.